says it's a weird place. When the first European naturalist encountered the platypus, this egg-laying, venomous, duck-billed, beaver-tailed, otter-footed mammal, they thought it was a joke. It's unique, but could almost be viewed as a hybrid in terms of evolution. Now, similarly, I'm fifth generation Australian from English, Irish, Scottish, German or Swiss, possibly French extraction. So a human platypus, if you will. And sometimes people don't know quite what to make of me either. Another Australian native I'd like to mention is the lyrebird. I hasten to add that's spelled L-Y-R-E. You can find a 3-minute video of this film by one of my heroes, David Attenborough, on YouTube. In addition to having its own song, the lyrebird is a mimic, incorporating other sounds faithfully into its own expression. In this particular instance, the video on YouTube, it's a camera shutter, a chainsaw, amongst other things. And thirdly, again, the whole concept of threes, is the bowbird. The male collects objects, usually blue, to attract a mate, and makes its nest in such a way that it actually resembles a portal of some kind. Now, I'm an eclectic pagan, meaning that I derive my ideas, my tastes, my style, my beliefs, etc. from various sources, and that I'm attached to no particular school. In that sense, my personal expression of my spirituality represents or resembles the flora and fauna of my land, my home. I'm largely influenced by what my esteemed American colleagues, if I may be so bold, referred to as the revival of the indigenous European traditions, but I'm also influenced by spiritual practices from other traditions, eclectically applying or reinterpreting the concepts or ideas rather than a direct misappropriation of practice. I will clarify at this point, unlike the avian kin that I mentioned earlier, I'm not motivated by a desire to attract a mate. I define myself as a pagan and a witch, and I continue to be open about my spiritual path, hoping that in due course the kind of ignorance we face will be eliminated, and the pagan path in all its forms will be accepted and be able to embrace freely by all who seek it. Having said that, I see much of my experience in the light of interracial and interfaith, attempting to cross boundaries and borders and establish common ground. In hindsight, even my work in theatre was often about first translations of work or about cross-cultural productions, interracial themes, etc. I have an ongoing magical and spiritual relationship with the Shiwa Buddhist Pamonku. The man who encouraged me to put a submission to the Parliment was actually a Christian. Some of my most interesting conversations about spirituality have been with Jews and born-again Christians. My partner's from a Muslim background, so it's a reoccurring theme for me. Now, I've also become a celebrant in order to address the needs of my community, whether that's pagan or theatre, sometimes quite similar, and to provide a service to the community in general or to any who want someone who can address a spiritual desire without formalising it into a monotheistic context. I'm a justice of the peace, again because I believe one has to be active in the mainstream community to break down prejudice. One of the first things most of them say is, oh, not what I expected. Now, I'm in the long and slow process of becoming a psychologist in order to attempt to provide a service to both the broader community, but again, also to those within it that want to speak to someone who understands the alternative view. I was inspired to listen to Drake in the Men Who Loved the Goddess panel when he described his work as a psychologist. I'm sitting there going, that's what I want to do. He's already doing that. That's so cool. Even the instance of my normal employment, if you can call it such a thing, has become an act of devotion to the goddess and the god. One of the things I often get asked is, what do you believe in? What do you do? I always say that I follow the path of the goddess and the god. I'm watching the fingers very closely. And typically, this means conceptualising the divine in terms of both male and female energies, equal but different. I see the practice of paganism as a celebration of life and the cyclical nature thereof. Also generally mention what I think of the big three: do as you will, harm you none, to your own self be true, and the laws of threes. Then people generally want to know about casting spells, which I always liken to the power of prayer. To me, spell casting is prayer, and prayer is meditation. One of the aspects of paganism I enjoy is the freedom of personal expression and the freedom to worship as it suits the individual. With freedom comes responsibility. You know, they're interlaid. And this is where the concept of service comes in. However, you know, you are able to serve the gods and goddesses you honour, serve your community and society in general in the way that suits you. What I call focus beads or prayer beads, if you prefer, to channel prayer and intention. I was taught the rosary, and that didn't resonate much for me. I always loved the beads. And then I saw the pictures of the beads used by other religions, and I was similarly fascinated. I read about witches' necklaces of amber and jet, and various magical stories involving the seemingly simple act of knitting and beading. And I lived through the macrame craze of the 70s, failed to take up crochet or knitting despite the best efforts of some very good home economics teachers. I read about knot magic, I lived in China briefly, and I saw all kinds of beautiful knots used there in various charms and decorations. When my mother died, 3 months after my best friend also died, I was lucky enough to have a copy of the Pagan Book of Living and Dying by Starhawk and Masha Nightmare and Reclaiming the Collective to comfort me. My grief inspired me to make my own mourning beads, honouring my beloved dead, and in the process acting as a focus for my mourning period and in due course facilitating the transition out of mourning as well. During this time I also made some simpler beads honouring the elements and the guardians, and these beads ended up as a focal point in terms of finally stopping smoking. I started to talk to others about the concept of meditation beads and the concept of personalising them as focus beads. I use that term because I began to realise that the beads can have a secular application as well as a religious history. History of meditation beads can be traced back roughly 500 years before Christ. Some sources suggest that the earliest use of prayer beads can be attributed to Hinduism, where they are called japamala or mala. Buddhists and Sikhs also use malas, and the Baha'i use prayer beads in their practice. The other contender for the earliest use of prayer beads is Islam. It's thought that in the early Muslim era, loose pebbles were used to count prayers, or people counted in their fingers. They're known as misbahasa. The prayer note didn't appear in a Christian context until roughly the 3rd century, where it was first recorded being used by Orthodox monks and hermits. There are 2 existing exceptions in the prayer bead story. The Greek warrior beads, or kundalini, are a little unusual in the historical perspective of meditation beads, and they are thought to have evolved from either the kombaskini used by the Orthodox monks or the Islamic misbah. Armenians also have their own warrior beads, again unusual because of their secular nature. The Christian rosary is a relative newcomer attributed formerly to St Dominic in 1214. The Anglican Church created its own rosary in the 1980s. The most contemporary prayer beads within the Christian Church are the Ruder and Pearls of Life, which were developed in Sweden. Even further, now researching all come together, linked like the beads. I've read articles from various scientific journals such as the British Medical Journal, Journal of Alternative Health and Complementary Medicine, through the journals on mental health, early childhood literacy, holistic nursing practice, and more than I could mention through various religious publications. All examine the concept of focus beads is simple. The process unfolds into a significant practice with surprising power, and the end result is useful, relevant, and a pleasure from start to finish. They can be as simple or as complex as their creator desires. They can be for ongoing use, occasional, seasonal, even as a gift. The beads can be utilised as a focus on a healing, a particular meditation, a tool for mindfulness, or to consolidate and focus intention. They can be designed and utilised for a specific purpose, event, or individual. Essentially extrapolating upon established foundations, they're both a spiritual and psychological tool. Psychologically, as a meditation tool, the concept of focus beads aims to offer an avenue to deepen and explore our spirituality and potentially to act as a pathway for personal transformation. Now, to honour the Parliament, I've designed a set of prayer beads specifically for the Parliament, and I'll be happy to share them with anyone who's interested. Just email me, head@prayerbeads, and I'll email you the piece that I wrote, and that's pretty much me out of time. Thank you all so much for your attention.